July 7, 1944. 4:45 in the morning. Northern Saipan. A tired, blood-stained American officer steps into the open, right in the middle of his line. He is 44 years old. He has worn a uniform for almost a quarter of a century. And in a few minutes, nearly 4,500 Japanese soldiers are going to try to run straight through him. Welcome to War Era Records. Today, we are going back to the biggest banzai charge of the Pacific War into one man who decided that if his battalion was going to die, it was going to die around him. Lieutenant Colonel William Joseph O'Brien. The .50 caliber. The Jeep. And the morning the sky over Saipan turned into a killing ground. Setup, why Saipan mattered. Before we get to the charge itself, you need to know why Saipan was worth all this blood. Saipan is a volcanic island in the Marianas, about 1,500 miles from Tokyo. In June 1944, that number mattered more than anything, because the new American B-29 bombers could reach Japan from there. If Saipan falls, Tokyo is in range. If Saipan holds, Japan still has a shield. The Japanese commander on the island, Lieutenant General Yoshitsugu Saito, understands this. He has roughly 30,000 troops, dug into caves, ravines, and ridges, with orders to fight to the last man. On June 16, the 27th Infantry Division lands on the southern beaches. In that division is the 105th Infantry Regiment. In that regiment is 1st Battalion. And in command of that battalion is a National Guard officer from Troy, New York. Lieutenant Colonel William J. O'Brien. He is not some young, fresh academy graduate. He joined the Guard during World War I, stayed in, trained generation after generation of soldiers. After 24 years in uniform, the war has finally caught up to him. For 3 weeks, his battalion claws its way up the island. Yard by yard. Cave by cave. Ridge by ridge. By the evening of July 6, they have driven the Japanese into a shrinking pocket on the northern end, near the Tanapag plain. But victory has a price. Out of 11 rifle companies in the 1st and 2nd battalions, many are down to half strength. Some platoons, that should have around 40 men, are fighting with 12 or 15. Ammunition is low. The men are hungry, exhausted and running on nerves and habit more than anything else. The American front is thin. Too thin. 1st Battalion holds the left. 2nd Battalion holds the right. Between them is a gap. O'Brien knows you do not leave a hole in a line when you are facing an enemy that does not retreat. He asks for reinforcements. There are none. The division is stretched from one side of the northern plain to the other. He also knows something else. The Japanese are not done. Foreshadowing, the night before. On the night of July 6, small Japanese patrols probe the American foxholes. Short, sharp firefights. A few shots. A grenade. Then silence. They are not trying to break through. They are feeling the line, looking for soft spots. Prisoners taken earlier in the week have already warned what is coming. Saito has ordered a final attack. Everyone who can stand will go. Front-line troops, walking wounded, staff officers, engineers, even civilians with sharpened bamboo poles. In Japanese, the word is gyokusai, honorable shattered jewel, a poetic term for dying rather than surrendering. American soldiers, hearing banzai, screamed again and again in earlier attacks, just call it a banzai charge. Whatever you call it, the idea is simple. A human wave. No prisoners. No retreat. That night, O'Brien walks the line himself. He stops at foxholes. Checks ammunition. Makes sure there are extra bandoliers, extra grenades. He tells his officers to fix bayonets and keep them fixed. This won't just be shooting, he warns. They're coming in close. Around 4:30 in the morning, the probing fire stops. Then the world goes quiet. Too quiet. Somewhere out in the darkness, beyond the thin American line, thousands of men are drinking, shouting, chanting war cries, reciting prayers, saying goodbye to their own lives. The Americans can hear them. They just cannot see them. Not yet. The charge begins. At 4:45, the night starts to change color. Not dawn yet, but the sky is beginning to gray, enough that shapes are visible. Out in front of the 105th, something moves. A lot of somethings. Through that gap between 1st and 2nd battalions, the Japanese finally come. They are not in neat parade ground formation. They are in a mass, a flood, officers up front with swords and pistols, behind them hundreds and hundreds of men with rifles, bayonets tied onto sticks, bamboo spears, even rocks in their hands. Some of them barely have uniforms left. Some are bandaged, limping. But they are all moving in the same direction. Straight at the thinnest part of the American line. Major Edward McCarthy, commanding 2nd Battalion, will later say it looked like a stampede from an old Western film, only this herd screams and keeps coming when you shoot it. In the center of that threatened sector stands O'Brien. He does not head to a safe command post. He does not sit on a radio in the rear. He grabs his 2 Colt M1911 pistols, both .45 caliber, and runs forward toward the men who are about to break, not away from them. Hand to hand. The American infantry open up first. Rifles crack. Machine guns begin to hammer. Mortars drop rounds out in front of the line. The first rows of Japanese attackers fall, then the second, then the third. But there are more behind them. Too many. Within minutes, the leading edge of the charge hits the foxholes like a physical impact. This is not careful, measured fire and maneuver anymore. This is chaos. Bayonets. Rifle butts. Entrenching tools. Men clawing and punching in the dark. One-on-one violence, repeated hundreds of times up and down the line. In this storm, O'Brien moves like a piece of shrapnel, bouncing from position to position. He fires both pistols into the crowd, left hand, right hand. He shouts at his men to stay low, to keep firing, to hold where they are. When the magazines run dry, he drops the pistols and lifts a rifle from a wounded soldier. A moment later he takes a bullet in the shoulder that spins him half around. His men try to drag him back, but he shakes them off. He keeps fighting. The Japanese do what they came to do. They push through that gap and begin to flow behind the American line. The front fractures into isolated pockets. Some foxholes are overrun. Others are surrounded and cut off. Behind the infantry, 500 yards back, the artillery of the 10th Marines is suddenly in direct danger. Japanese troops are already moving on the gun positions. Some howitzer crews abandon their pieces and pick up rifles. Others swing the guns around and fire canister shells at point-blank range, turning each howitzer into a gigantic shotgun. But in that first hour, the crucial point is still the center. And in the center of the center stands a jeep. The jeep and the .50 caliber. About 50 yards behind the front line sits a Willys jeep. On the back of it is a pedestal mount. On that pedestal is one of the most feared weapons in American service. The Browning M2 heavy machine gun. .50 caliber. Air-cooled. About 84 pounds of steel and hate. The gunner is dead, collapsed over the weapon. O'Brien sees the jeep, sees the gun, and makes a decision. He runs through the storm, pulls the dead man aside, grabs the charging handle and slams it back. The belt feeds. The bolt closes. He stands up straight in that jeep, completely exposed, and squeezes the trigger. If you were anywhere near that field, you would recognize the sound instantly. The .50 cal does not chatter like a light machine gun. It hammers. Short, brutal bursts. Roughly 9 rounds every second. Every 5th round is a tracer, so you can watch the line of fire reach out through the gloom. From his slightly raised position, O'Brien can see over the heads of his own men and into the knot of Japanese pouring through the gap. He tracks across the front, left to right to left, scything rows of attackers down. Those big bullets were designed to chew through aircraft and light armor. Against human bodies, the effect is horrifying. One hit is enough. Sometimes one round goes through more than one man. The jeep shudders under the recoil. It was never meant to carry this kind of weapon, but nobody here cares about doctrine. The only doctrine now is, stop them or die where you stand. American soldiers in the foxholes look back and see their battalion commander silhouetted in the half-light, upright in the back of a jeep that is shaking under his feet, his wounded shoulder bleeding, his hands locked on the grips of a glowing machine gun. You can measure that kind of leadership later in reports and studies, but in the moment it is simple. If the colonel is up there taking that risk, then you do not run. You dig in deeper and keep firing. Other heroes on the field. O'Brien is not the only man making a last stand that morning. A couple 100 yards away, in Company A's sector, a 29-year-old private named Thomas Baker has planted himself behind his M1 rifle and is calmly cutting down attackers. He has already made a name for himself earlier in the campaign by wiping out a Japanese position almost by himself. Now, surrounded by chaos, he stays laser-focused. One shot, one target, working the rifle as fast as he can aim. He is from the same hometown as O'Brien, Troy, New York. Two men from the same city, fighting separate battles on the same cursed plain. Farther to the rear, at a battalion aid station, the unit dentist, Captain Ben Salomon, is suddenly watching injured men on stretchers being stabbed and shot as Japanese soldiers break into the medical area. Salomon is supposed to be a non-combatant. The Geneva Conventions say medical officers do not fight. Reality says otherwise. He fights first with his hands and a scalpel, killing several attackers in close combat, then grabs an M1 and finally takes over a machine gun to cover the retreat of the wounded. Again and again he moves the gun to new positions, always toward the enemy, never away, mowing down the men chasing his patients. 3 different men. 3 different corners of the battlefield. All making the same choice. Stand and buy time. When the gun runs hot. Back at the Jeep, O'Brien has a different problem. The M2 is a beast, but it has limits. It is air-cooled. Fire too much, too fast, and the barrel overheats. The metal expands. The mechanism starts to seize. O'Brien is firing far beyond the recommended rate. Training says 40 to 50 rounds per minute for sustained fire. He is dumping hundreds. The barrel glows red. Smoke curls off the steel. Then the weapon jams. The bolt stays open and refuses to move. The gun is now a very heavy, very hot piece of scrap. The Japanese are closing in to within 50 yards. The wave is still coming. The ground in front of the line is already covered with bodies, but there are more men climbing over them. O'Brien tries to clear the jam, yanking the handle so hard the hot metal burns his hand. Nothing. The gun is done for now. He does not climb down and run for the rear. He jumps off the Jeep and goes looking for another weapon. He moves through a landscape of dead and dying men, grabbing a Garand here, a carbine there. He fires until a weapon is empty, then lets it fall and takes the next one from the ground. His shoulder is a mess. Blood is running down his arm, soaking his sleeve. He keeps going. Nearby, the fight has broken down into clusters of men grappling in and around shell holes. Some Japanese soldiers are attacking with wooden spears. Others with swords. American infantry are using rifle butts like clubs, stabbing with bayonets at ranges measured in inches. Baker, in his sector, is hit, then hit again. He refuses to leave his position. When he can no longer walk, he asks to be propped up against a tree with a .45 pistol. 8 rounds. He knows what that means. So do the men who place him there and then reluctantly fall back. At the aid station, Salomon keeps shifting his gun, firing until he is physically overwhelmed. When his body is later found, he has dozens of wounds and almost 100 Japanese dead in front of his last firing position. These are not movie heroics. This is math. All 3 men are trading their lives for minutes. Minutes for their friends to fall back, to regroup, to form new lines. Back to the Jeep. After some time, the barrel of the .50 cools enough to risk again. O'Brien climbs back into the Jeep, tries the charging handle, and feels the bolt move. The heavy gun is alive again. He stands up once more and opens fire. By now, the sun is above the horizon. He can see the battlefield in full light. The Tanapag plain has turned into a carpet of bodies. Japanese soldiers lie in heaps, 3 and 4 deep in places. The air is thick with dust and smoke and the metallic smell of blood and burnt propellant. The charge is still coming, but it is slower. The momentum is bleeding away along with the men. Reinforcements from the Marine divisions are starting to hit the flanks. Tank destroyers rumble up, their 76mm guns blasting high explosive shells into the densest groups of attackers. Surviving artillery guns are firing over open sights, using anything they have left. O'Brien keeps sweeping the .50 across the front. Every burst tears holes in the already shredded ranks. But belts do not last forever. He watches the last one dwindling down. 30 rounds left. 20. 10. The Japanese are within 30 yards now. Close enough to see faces, to see mouths open in screamed war cries, to see officers waving swords in the air. The final rounds leave the gun. The bolt locks to the rear. No more ammunition. The final moment. There is a rifle lying on the Jeep's seat. O'Brien grabs it, jumps down behind the flimsy cover of the vehicle and fires until that weapon is empty too. There is no more time to find another gun. The attackers are too close. He picks up a bayonet from the ground. Just a piece of steel built to mount on a rifle, now a standalone knife. Around him, a few scattered American soldiers see what is about to happen. They try to fight their way toward him, but each man has his own circle of enemies to deal with. They cannot reach their colonel. He plants his back against the Jeep and faces the oncoming wave. Swords flash. Bayonets stab. O'Brien swings and thrusts with that short blade, doing what he was taught decades earlier in bayonet drill on some quiet American training field. 3 enemies. 5. 10. It does not matter. Eventually the numbers catch up. Sergeant John Breen, in a nearby foxhole, sees the crowd swallow O'Brien. When the mass of Japanese surges past, the Jeep is still there. The battalion commander is not. The fighting on the plain continues for hours. The banzai charge breaks and regroups, until there is almost nobody left to regroup with. By midday, the attack is effectively over. By evening, American forces have sealed the area. When they walk the battlefield the next day, the men of the 105th find O'Brien's body near that Jeep, lying among dozens of Japanese dead. He still has the bayonet in his hand. He never moved away from the line he was trying to hold. Baker and Salomon. They also find Private Thomas Baker. He is still propped against the tree where his comrades left him. His .45 is empty. A semicircle of enemy bodies lies in front of him. 8 bullets. 8 dead men. At the aid station, they find Captain Ben Salomon at his final machine gun position. He has multiple bullet wounds, bayonet cuts, and sword slashes. Around his gun are nearly 100 Japanese bodies. The banzai charge has failed. But the price in blood is almost beyond counting. The 105th's 1st and 2nd battalions have been chewed to pieces. Of about 1,600 men who started the battle, well over half are dead or wounded. Some rifle companies barely exist on paper by the end of the day. On the other side, Japanese losses are catastrophic. More than 4,000 bodies are counted in front of the 105th's positions alone. Saipan is effectively finished. The island is declared secure on July 9. Tokyo is now within bomber range. For Japan's leadership, the fall of Saipan is a political earthquake. The loss helps trigger the resignation of Prime Minister Hideki Tojo. Strategically, the war has tilted decisively against Japan. Tactically and emotionally, the men of the 105th are thinking about something much smaller. They are thinking about 3 men who made their last stand so that others could live. Aftermath, medals and memory. Medal of Honor recommendations go in soon after the battle. O'Brien is cited for repeated acts of courage throughout the campaign and for refusing evacuation on July 7, taking over the Jeep-mounted .50 and fighting until he is killed. Baker is recommended for his earlier actions and for choosing to stay and fight when he could have been carried out, insisting on being left with a pistol and using every last round. Salomon is put forward as well, but his case runs into a strange problem. As a medical officer, he is technically a non-combatant. At the time, the rules say medical personnel are not supposed to receive combat awards. His nomination stalls. O'Brien's family receives his Medal of Honor in May 1945 in his hometown of Troy, New York. The city turns out for him. Businesses close. People line the streets. For them he is not just a name in the newspaper, he is the kid who grew up there, the men who stayed in the guard for decades, the officer who died standing in the open with his men. Baker's family receives his Medal of Honor at the same ceremony. Salomon's recognition takes much longer. Witnesses testify. Veterans push. Paperwork moves slowly through the system. Almost 6 decades later, in 2002, his family finally receives his Medal of Honor. Very late, but not forgotten. 3 men. Same regiment. Same division. Same day. You do not see that combination anywhere else in American military history. What the Army learned. The story of that morning does not just live in medals and monuments. It also ends up in manuals. After Saipan, American commanders take a hard look at what happened on the Tanapag plain. They draw some blunt lessons. First, heavy machine guns are the core of any defense against mass infantry attacks. The .30 caliber guns are useful, but the .50 is decisive. Against tightly packed human waves, nothing else on the line that morning cut men down at that rate. Jeep-mounted .50s, which had been improvised, become more common in prepared positions later in the war. If you do not have a tank and you need mobile heavy firepower, you put the biggest gun you can on a vehicle and you point it at the most likely axis of attack. Second, visible leadership matters. Units near O'Brien hold longer, fight harder, refuse to break. After-action studies highlight a clear pattern: when men can see their officers sharing the danger, they stay in the fight. The Army begins emphasizing that junior leaders in particular cannot hide in holes when their units are under heavy attack. They do not all need to stand on a jeep like O'Brien, but they do need to be seen, moving among the men, giving orders face to face. Third, ammunition planning changes. At Saipan, guns like O'Brien's run low and overheat because they are firing at an extreme rate. Commanders realize that in situations like a banzai charge, conservative firing tables mean nothing. In a few minutes of crisis, a heavy machine gun might burn through what was meant to last hours. Future defenses are stocked with more belts, more spare barrels, and better plans for resupply under fire. Fourth, gaps are deadly. The banzai charge does not magically slice through a strong point. It pours through a seam between battalions. After Saipan, American divisions in the Pacific work hard to avoid leaving empty spaces in a line. If there are too few men, the line is shortened. A continuous, thinner defense is better than a longer one with open holes. Japanese commanders also learn from Saipan, but in a different, darker way. The casualty ratio is so lopsided that high command begins to realize that massive banzai charges against prepared American defenses are suicide with no payoff. Some local commanders still launch them on other islands, but nothing matches the scale of the Tanapag attack again. Legacy. After the war, the 105th Infantry Regiment rebuilds and moves on to new battles, but the veterans who walked across that plain on July 8 never forget what they saw around that jeep, that tree, and that machine gun. In Troy, New York, a memorial stands for O'Brien, Baker, and another local officer, Ogden Ross. Replicas of medals of honor are there, but the real legacy is not medal, it is the men who walked away from Saipan because someone else chose not to. In museums and training courses, O'Brien's actions are still discussed. Should he have stayed behind the line and coordinated? Was it wise for a battalion commander to stand in an open jeep under direct fire? On paper, maybe not. On the ground, that morning, it mattered. His firepower tore chunks out of the charge. His presence glued frightened men to their positions. His sacrifice, combined with Baker's and Salamon's, helped keep the entire sector from collapsing. In the end, one local guard officer, one private with 8 bullets and one dentist with a machine gun helped decide the most important morning on Saipan. If you want more forgotten stories like this, make sure you subscribe to War Era Records and turn on notifications. Tell us in the comments where you are watching from and whether anyone in your family served in World War II or any other conflict. You watching, remembering, and sharing is what keeps men like Lieutenant Colonel William J. O'Brien, Private Thomas Baker and Captain Ben Salomon from fading into silence.